Welcome to another episode of Washington in Focus. I'm your host, Tim Klauser, with the Center Square's Washington State Capitol correspondent, Carlene Johnson, here to talk about a recent tax increase in the city of Auburn after the Auburn City Council approved a councilmanic sales tax increase without voter approval to fund increases to public safety spending. But it's not exactly going straight to hiring more officers. Carlene, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the grant program that allows them to do this?
Yeah, this bill that passed during the 2025 legislative session was pretty passionately debated in a couple of hearings that I sat in the legislature, Tim, because the whole idea was this was what lawmakers were going to do instead of, I should back up a minute, when Governor Bob Ferguson said, I'm going to put $100 million, remember when he was campaigning, $100 million for cops across the state where we've got the lowest, number of police officers per capita anywhere in the nation, and we need more cops. So that was going to be what he did. Well, instead, he turned it over to lawmakers, and what lawmakers came up with is legislation that allows cities, municipalities to pass a 1/10 of a penny sales and use tax increase in their communities for public safety purposes, not for cops, for public safety purposes. It could be for their local jails. It could be for diversion programs. It could be for electronic home monitoring. All of those things qualify. So cities can use that. And the rub of it, though, the thing that kind of didn't, most conservatives, I don't think any Republicans ended up supporting this bill, was, okay, you cannot access any grant money from the state level to hire more police officers for your community unless you're willing to raise sales and use taxes on your community. That's the problem. So you can raise all this money, right? You can increase sales and use taxes on your citizens in your community. If you're willing to do that, then you can apply for these grants to, in fact, hire more police officers for your community. So it's you got to do this if you're going to get that. And as I know you've reported on, Tim, some folks in more conservative parts of the state have not been willing to go this route.
Yeah, the tax itself, it's relatively minor. I mean, a penny on every $10 spent, but it's on top of the existing sales tax rate, which is around 9% across much of the state, on top of other sales tax measures that cities have as well. And a lot of those things that they're spending it on, the indignant defense, electric home monitoring, and stuff like that, a lot of areas have trouble funding that. But I think we have to return to the fact that, Washington state does have the lowest amount of law enforcement officers per capita in the country, behind Washington, D.C. as well. And Ferguson pushed this initially, but ahead of the last legislative session as a way to, increase our numbers, hire more officers. And the grant does allow them to do that. You can use it to hire officers, but your story notes, while you can use this money for those things that we mentioned before, if you want to hire an officer, it's only able to cover so much of that salary, correct?
Right. And Auburn came right out. They had a study session ahead of the vote that they took to approve this on Tuesday night. They'd had a study session the week prior, and it was openly discussed that we may or may not apply for the grant to get more cops for our community. We're definitely going to push this, sales and use tax increase through, which, as you mentioned, they kept saying, this is modest. This is modest. They said, maybe $19 a year annually for some, a family with, median income in the city of Auburn. Of course, it depends on what you buy for the year, right? It depends on, how much you go to hotels or whatever, that kind of a thing. But, they're not saying that they have any intention at this point of applying for the grants to get more cops for the city. They're just saying we've agreed to go with this because we need more money for the SCORE jail. That's the South County, the main holding facility outside of the small city jail capacity where a lot of the offenders are sent. They needed more public defense revenue. They needed more money for electronic home monitoring. They needed more money for behavioral health and other diversion programs for juvenile offenders. Yeah, because like most communities, Auburn's crime rate is much higher than the national average. They've got some serious issues. But They're not saying that they have any intention at this point of going after the grant. They're just saying they're implementing this because now they were given the ability to do so. But like you referenced, it's only communities that, maybe more liberal leaning communities, and Auburn is certainly one of them, have been willing to go this route. At the same time, you've got folks saying, hey, wait a minute. The whole idea was if you're going to put this on us, then you better go for the grant. But as you mentioned, it doesn't cover the whole cost of a police officer. If an officer is going to, you're going to pay a cop $125,000 a year, which is where a lot of them are even starting at right now, to lure them from, especially, lateral hires from other departments where they have experience. If the city is only going to get reimbursed from the state for like 75% of that, they got to come up with the rest of the money for, pay and benefits for that officer. So it puts the cities on the hook for coming up with a good chunk of that revenue for additional law enforcement. So many of them are saying, okay, you give us opportunity to raise the sales tax. Heck yeah, we're going to do that. But we may or may not, go for the grants to hire more officers.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of this comes back to, as well as the cities being able to pass this tax increase without voter approval. And that's not to say that the majority of voters are against funding public safety. A lot of times in the cities across the state, you see their budget split 60-40, where 60% is public safety, 40% is all the other programs. But at the same time, you have places like the city of Yakima, where I report on quite frequently. They're grappling with a $9 million budget deficit of their own, and the majority of their budget is public safety. But when you break it down outside of, say, like public safety and all the other programs, the majority of almost every budget in the state comes down to personnel. So you can either choose to raise the cost of living to keep that afloat, or you can make cuts to public safety, or you can cut down a lot of the non-essential spending, which not every area is to do. But I think the issue with this tax, or the potential issue, is that, you can have cities that are less willing to cut non-essential spending and more willing to raise taxes to make up that difference. And it doesn't give voters the chance to reject it. Like in the case of Yakima, they're facing this $9 million deficit. They said, look, if voters don't pass this tax increase, which is separate from this, but the same amount of 0.1%, then we're going to have to cut public safety by around $5 million. Voters rejected that tax increase anyways, not because they don't support public safety, but because they're in support of responsible fiscal management.
Well, that's exactly it. And you're right. The spending on personnel, and that I think in the city of Auburn, they've got like a brand new public safety building. They've been remodeling City Hall. People look at things like that. I don't know what, how many additional, city personnel have been hired in Auburn, but part of what this increase in the tax is going to cover, the city said, is, the improvements they've made and the remodel and the new public safety building. So at the same time, not saying whether or not they're going to apply for the grants, I think that's going to potentially not sit well with people in the community going, okay, wait a minute, you're burdening us with an additional tax at a time when everything's gone up. And what didn't kick in already this year, July 1 or October 1, is kicking in January 1. All the taxes that were passed during the 2025 session, it's all kicking in, whether it's at the gas pump or your power bill or, whatever, your insurance rates. Everybody is struggling. You've got this additional tax now in the name of public safety, but without any additional commitment to necessarily hire a single additional police officer for the city. I think there might be some folks, showing up at future council meetings asking some questions about that.
Yeah, I think another issue with this tax is that with it being that more minor 0.1%, like a lot of local option taxes are, it gives voters the opportunity to forget about it. It's easy to forget about a tax that the council passes without voter approval, and then the legislature comes through in the next session and says, look, we're anticipating another state deficit. We need to raise taxes. Here's some more local option taxes you can pass without voter approval. I mean, when you just keep taking those time after time after time, yeah, they're minor increases, but you gradually see your sales tax rate increase along with the property tax rate through other bills and everything else. It's just increasing that tax burden. And we're seeing a lot of residents and business owners in particular coming out against these tax increases saying, look, you're just passing all these costs down onto us, costs that we already can't afford.
Yeah. I mean, you did the story just last week talking about the survey that came out from the Association of Washington Business about, the impact and they're feeling it. They're passing it on to all of us, all the customers. And those that aren't are just maybe barely hanging on, and maybe won't make it. And certainly we know what's coming. 2026 legislative session, you've got all the majority Democrats already saying there will inevitably be tax hikes. You've got the governor positioning himself again saying, we're going to hold that down. But, remind everybody that's exactly what happened going into the 25 session. We had the governor saying no to tax increases, and then we signed the largest tax increase in state history. So we'll see.
Yeah.
It'll be fun.
And again, it's not to say that voters don't want to fund public safety. It's more so that voters should be given the opportunity to weigh in on issues of spending. And if they want to hire more officers, they should be given the opportunity to say, hey, look, we would rather cut spending and then put that money towards officers rather than just increasing our budget overall, which has happened across much of the state and with the legislature and particularly year over year after year. But definitely an issue that we'll continue to keep our eyes on as you, me, and everyone else at the Center Square covers this. But for anyone hoping to catch those stories, you can read them at thecentersquare.com. Otherwise, thank you for joining us for another episode of Washington in Focus.